Today we're taking a look at Windsor & Newton Cotman watercolors. This is a comparative field test, so we're going to see how these perform as compared to professional grade watercolors. We're going to talk about affordable alternatives, and we're going to talk about why Windsor & Newton Cotman watercolors may not be the best choice for you. So keep watching. Hey guys! So by popular demand tonight, we're going to be taking a look at the Windsor & Newton Cotman. This is one of their like pocket sketch or field sketches, and I have had this set for several years. A while back, for my patrons, I did a comparative swatch test of these comparable Windsor & Newton professional grade pans, and I think Daniel Smith, their mixing set. And many of you requested that I go ahead and do a demonstration of the Cotman, and I think this is going to end up going public. I haven't 100% decided yet. Now, this was bought in 2014. It was bought to replace a Sakura koi set that I'd forgotten, and I purchased it at the Dick Blick in Atlanta, and I used it all throughout AWA, and I hated this set. So I'm really not a fan of Cotman watercolors. They burn me in other instances, and I wanted to do a field test to demonstrate why I feel that way. So I have this really cute illustration. It's of Kara. She's looking at a firefly. It's on Fabriano cotton rag watercolor paper, so it's nice watercolor paper. I'm trying to eliminate reasons why these paints could possibly not succeed. So I'm going to go ahead and use a very soft eraser, the Creative Mark White Stroke, to remove the graphite, and then I'm going to attach it to a sturdy support board. All right, so that has been erased. We're going to take some low-tack blue painter's tape, and we're just going to attach this to this support board. And since I want to paint to the edges on this, I'm going to double fold my tape over and attach it in 2 spots to the back of this watercolor paper. And this isn't like stretching, not by any means, but for a piece as small as this, with a fairly thick paper surface, we shouldn't really need to stretch. So we've got our illustration, we've got our clean water, we've got our paints, we've got a pipette. Let me clear a little room, and we will have a daisy palette soon. Ta-da! So the first thing I'm going to want to do, and I would do this with any palette regardless of quality, is I'm going to want to put some clean water on every pan. And this field set uses the cradle system that Windsor & Newton used for a while with their plastic palettes. I actually prefer the metal palettes. I'm not a huge fan of this cradle method. And I did have it in a larger Windsor & Newton, like the professional grade set as well, and I didn't care for it in that either. So even though I do enjoy Windsor & Newton paints, you know, sometimes there's just something that doesn't work quite as well as you would like. So I'm going to give my blues a chance to activate. Alright, so we're going to take some Cotman, and I believe this is ultramarine. Oh, yeah, okay. So you see that this is a, let me actually grab something I can swatch on. Just finished a Jane Davenport swatch test, so needed to remove that from the pad. Okay, so this is Fluid Easy Block watercolor paper. This is their darker blue. This is their intense ultramarine. The other one is probably a cerulean. So neither, yeah, wow. See, they're just about the same color. Neither of them are, they're warm blues, neither of them are cool blue, and neither of them are particularly dark, and there isn't an indigo in this set, nor is there a purple. So if you want to mix anything darker than this, you're going to have to mix in some browns, maybe a red, but you're never going to achieve a true purple with this color selection. Now, none of these pans have been replaced. These are the stock pans that came with the set, yet they thought to include a white, which most of us know that Chinese white or titanium white, the two whites most commonly included in watercolor sets, are just not effective at all. We would have been better served with a phthalo blue. It would have made for better mixes, and of course we have So basically, any green we mix with these warm blues, it's going to be kind of muted and kind of muddy. It's not going to have as like a nice resonance, like a chromatic resonance. We're going to mix a red in there too, because I'm trying to get a darker, either like a blackish color or a dark indigo. I want to do a night sky. And some brown. I mean, I'm basically just throwing everything I can in there to get this. So that's a lot of color to get pale mud. And I guess that's fine as an overall wash color, but it's just really not the color we'd hoped for. We really mixed for a lot stronger of a color than that. So we're gonna use this, and I apologize, I'm sort of off the screen. Use this as like our base wash and then try to get the color a little darker. So if we were using a nicer brand, we would have a much darker color by now. So if we were using Winsor Newton Professional, if we were using Holbein, if we were using Daniel Smith, just almost anything would give us darker colors. I mean, even Sakura Koi watercolors are going to give us a darker wash when you do that much mixing. Okay, so I want to do some glow effects. So I'm rinsing out my brush. This is a quill, and I'm blending the color. I want it to look like the firefly is lighting up her face. And I need to let that dry, but I need to mix this not only darker, but darker in a way that makes visual sense. And that's going to be really a challenge because it doesn't seem like we have anywhere to go. So we'll mix in some more blue, and we'll mix in some more of this cool red, and this is a very cool red, and we'll mix in some more of this brown. So we're trying to make kind of a neutral color, and some of this green, and not much different, see? And I guess we can mix thicker, and you can also see that the colors are starting to separate out up there. So mixing these, it's just really hard to get like a solid color, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna keep trying. But I'm not going to push too much further than this because I don't think it can go much further than that. Okay, almost. See, this is like the best you're going to get is like a nondescript gray in terms of like trying to get towards a black. Even this darker brown here is just not really that dark. And these are pans that have been activated, so they're ready to paint, but there's so much glycerin in them and just not enough pigment. So again, I'm gonna let this dry. Actually, I wanna fix the glow rather on her face a little bit. Getting a little harsh in some areas. And then I'm gonna do the background. All right. Now that the background has had a chance to dry, I'm going to do another layer, but I wanted to show you that there is already some color separation issues. And we kind of knew that was going to happen, didn't we? Alright, so I'm going to do a glow effect with the firefly. I wanted to say lightning bug, and I was like, All right. And I will, once we start getting into this, I'm going to move everything so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. And I'm going to have to change out my water because I ended up putting a lot of something in it. I don't want to say pigment, I don't want to say color, but it's probably a lot of glycerin in it when I was trying to mix the background color correctly. I'm getting some buckling, but that's not really Cotman's fault. I probably should have secured the edges a bit better, considering how much water I'm gonna end up putting on this. So let's soak up some of that background water. And I already made a goop, so I'm gonna have to go grab a paper towel. Then I'm going to give this a chance to dry and change out my water. All right, so we've got a fresh thing of water. Going to go ahead, fill a well, and I'm going to grab a fresh sheet to swatch on. And we're gonna start with some yellow ochre and some scarlet red. That looks about right, but I want to swatch it. It's a little pinker than I remember, so maybe a little more yellow ochre. And I'm gonna let those dry before I apply them. But I mean, we have to let the background dry anyway. All right, the paper is still damp, and one of my swatches is also, but the other three are not. I think that will indeed work, although honestly, any of the three could have. I just was being kind of picky. While I wait for the background to dry, you can definitely see some gradation and some sedimentation and some dry edges. And if you're looking for that sort of effect, that's, you know, you'll get it. It looks cool here, it looks intentional here, but I wasn't intending to do that. I'm gonna run with it because half of being a good artist is knowing when to run. But just as a reviewer, it's not necessarily something I want to see unless I knew it was coming and I was prepared for it. So we're gonna do a little bit of yellow, and then we're going to use a clean brush and bring that out towards the edges, so that'll help create a glow effect. Can mirror that on her hair and in her eyes, and give that a chance to dry. Now, I know I'm going to want to do her hair. And now usually when I do Kara's hair, I start with burnt sienna, do Venetian red, and then I move on to Van Dyke brown and maybe sepia. I don't have those here, so I'm going to use the very glycerin-y burnt sienna and try to mix it strong enough. Actually, that might work. So I'm gonna give, actually I think I could proceed with her dress. So with her dress, I'm going to add a little bit of water to one of these daisy pans and grab a little bit of that blue because she's wearing a white dress, but white when it's in shadow tends to look blue or purple or gray. I'm gonna grab some of this background color and hopefully, you know, let's swatch that. All right, that looks good. So my big problem with these paints is you really have to mix a lot from the palette in order, at least so far. I'm sure I'll have other problems with these paints in a bit, but you really have to mix a lot from the palette in order to get even a really weak variation of the color. That's not very economical. You're really using more paint. And you're also wasting your time. Okay. Give those a chance to dry. So as you guys can see, that blue dried pretty hard to see, pretty non-existent. So we're gonna go ahead and move on for now to her skin. And then we'll go back to the dress. And I want to definitely reinforce that glow. So all the areas that are going to be closer to the firefly will get blended out, I think. And again, so far, my really big disappointment with these is that it really takes a lot more mixing and a lot more of the actual paint itself in order to get the saturation I'm used to from professional grade watercolors. And I'm not talking opacity, I'm just talking about like intensity. And nice watercolors will often, you'll have a selection of transparent colors as well. So I hesitate to say that nice watercolors are always transparent because that's not necessarily true. It really depends on the pigments that are being used as to whether or not your color is going to be transparent or not. And it's not always, it's often a reflection of quality because cheaper brands will use optical brighteners like chalk or titanium white to make the colors seem more vibrant in the pan, and then it's chalky and muddy on the paper. But there are opaque colors, yellow ochre, Venetian red. Those are colors that are, even among nice brands, tend to be more opaque and can get muddy over time. So I'm gonna let this dry. All right, so I think, well, that layer's still damp to the touch. Always an exciting thing to realize. So I'm going to go ahead and start on her hair. And realize that I missed her ear, so I'm gonna have to come back around and get that. Got that Children of the Corn thing going with the super bright eyes. We knock them down a little bit, they'll look a little more normal. And the color is light enough that I think my camera is unfortunately having a bit of trouble with it. Hopefully, we can get things darkened up a bit more. Right now, the background and Kara, they're just too similar. So I'm gonna have to do another layer, I think, on the background as well. So, need to give that hair a chance to dry. All right, so it must be a very humid night tonight. I'm sure I've said that a couple times already, but I'm just really impressed by how long this is taking to dry, and I don't think it has anything to do with the Cotman watercolors, and it doesn't necessarily have much to do with the paper. I mean, yes, it is a high quality paper, and sometimes cotton papers can take a little longer to dry in humid environments. All right, let's stir up that background color. I'm gonna rinse out my brush because sometimes it can pick up a lot of sedimented pigment and you can get a weird first stroke. And we're gonna, oh, I guess I should have tried to mix this darker, but I don't know that I could have gotten much darker with this, unfortunately. Okay, so when I do glow effects, in case you guys missed it the first couple times, I will paint around the object, leaving sort of a halo. And then if I want a soft glow, I'll go in and with either a wet brush or a thirsty brush, depending on how much paint is on the paper, I will soften that transition of color. And of course, if your paper is buckling or kipping, that can really negatively affect your ability to do glow effects. And I do a surprising number of glow effects in 7-inch Cara, which is sometimes difficult because I paint on Canson Montval, which is not really a high quality paper. And so dry times can be weird. It can either evaporate immediately or just stay pooled on the paper for hours. So glow effects are actually much easier for me on cotton rag papers or origami paper, which is a washi paper. You can get some really nice sort of diffused color blends with that as well. I want to paint a bunch of fireflies on my origami postcard paper. I may have to do that. All right. So that is another layer. Blend that up and over. And give that a chance to dry. Alright, it's still damp, but it is dry enough for me to proceed. It is very cool to the touch, and that's how you know it's still damp, even if there's no real surface shine. As you guys can see, there's a lot of color variation from the mixed color sort of breaking down, which, I mean, it makes for a cool effect, like I said earlier, but it's not really something most artists want to be able to control if that's going to happen. So the fact that it's sort of happening outside of my control is pretty annoying. All right. So I'm going to do another layer of skin tone. And for those of you wondering who this cutie is, this is Kara. And she is the main character of my comic, 7-Inch Kara, which you guys can read as a webcomic at 7inchkara.com. Or if you're like me and you like print comics, you can order the first volume, which is the first 4 chapters, plus a bonus story, plus a bunch of art, and also a concept art section. You can order that from my shop. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to need to start mixing a shadow color for her skin, which is going to be pretty difficult given our color selection because we don't have any purple, we don't have a mauve. So we're going to have to start with that cool red, and we're going to need a lot of it because these colors do not mix very intensely. And then we're going to grab a little bit of Viridian Green, not too much, just enough to desaturate it, and then some of this warm blue, and hope we didn't make mud. So, grab this. It's not the end of the world if we did indeed make mud. You can always clean the pan out, that's why we're swatching today. Not really sure. That should work. I'm gonna put it over the skin tone to see how it looks, and I'll let that dry before I apply it. Alright, so disappointingly, the second layer of skin tone basically is the same color as her hair. So I guess I could have used the burnt sienna they included to mix a very light skin tone very quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the shadow skin tone. And let that dry. And I'm going to need something for the cheeks, so it's probably going to end up being, I'll mix it now, a little bit of scarlet red, a little bit of this cooler red, and we'll see how that looks after this has had a chance to dry. Alright, so this has had a chance to dry. I'm going to go in with that pink I mixed a while back and add some blush. Blend that out a little bit. I have a feeling I'm going to have to paint the skin tone darker because it's just really getting lost. Alright, that's had a chance to soak in. So I'm gonna go ahead and darken it just a little bit. And I'm also going to go into that yellow. All right. So looks like everything needs a chance to dry. All right, guys. So that has had a chance to dry. I'm gonna go in to that burnt sienna. And I'm going to work directly from the pan because this color has so much glycerin in it. It's really hard to build up enough saturation. I'm trying to leave enough room for that glow to show up. Also, need to go ahead and mix a little bit of that with the darker brown so we can do her freckles. Although I don't know if we're finished with the skin yet. Can always do additional. Oh, too much water. Have to go grab a paper towel and pick that up. And then I'm going to lighten some of these freckles a little bit by dabbing them up. This is a little bit darker of a color than I normally use for her freckles. And you guys can see a pretty big shift in color between what's dry and what's wet. And while that looks cool, it's really not. We really want this wet color to be the color it's going to end up. And we were working directly from the palette, so it's a little frustrating that it dries. So, non-existent. All right, so that has finally dried. I'm gonna go in with the skin tone again. And try to build up some of this color. It's so... The Cotman watercolors are just so pale. They're so anemic when it comes to color that, you know, you may find yourself really struggling to build it up. And what I'm going to end up doing, and it's the same thing I do for my Cara pages, is I'm going to leave my paints out overnight, let them evaporate a little bit, and then come in and use that. And hopefully that'll work. It works with the regular professional grade Windsor & Newton watercolors. I don't know that I've ever tried that with the Cotman watercolors, so yeah, it's a good thing to know if it'll even work. But getting a lot of color separation there in the background. It's not coming up on camera as much as I would like, so I'm just going to have to do a follow-up blog post so I can show you guys what I'm talking about. And you really have to mix these colors if they've been sitting for any length of time, because they are definitely going to sediment back out. And I don't know why that happens. Could be the high amount of glycerin in them. That's just me hazarding, I guess. It could be some of the fillers that they're using. I can try and look into that and share that also on the blog if anybody is curious. Yeah, I should probably let that dry before it gets any muddier. All right, this has had a chance to dry out overnight. So we're going to go in with that skin tone. We want to see if it holds up. So first of all, we're going to swatch it. So this is the skin tone made from Cotman watercolors, and it has had a chance to dry overnight. So that is, it goes down, of course, a little darker. We're going to see how it dries because it's had a chance to evaporate. That's why the whole overnight thing is important. And that could mean a higher concentration of glycerin in the paint. And then we'll also try out that shadow color I mixed, because I could almost leave it like that. The contrast is almost dark enough, but I would like to go a little darker. So while those dry, I need to activate all my pans Well, maybe not all, but certainly the ones I think I'm going to be using. So that's at least the 2 hair colors, which you guys apparently can't see. Fix that. There you go. And I also want to go ahead and darken up her lips and her cheeks. This dried, the blush dried just basically non-existent. And then, so the other night, or last night rather, I worked directly with the burnt sienna, and that didn't really give me the effect I wanted. So I'm gonna go straight in with that dark brown. And I'll zoom in for you guys so you guys can see what I'm doing. And these remind me a lot of the Rowney Simply watercolors that I tested in, I believe, 2015, maybe 2016 now, where it's just the colors are all really muted, they're washed out. It's difficult to build up enough saturation. So, and I know some of you watching this are thinking, well, I don't really want to do saturated color. I want to do sort of Japanese, like manga influenced, very light watercolors where I'm only hitting the shadows and that's only with one color. So maybe Cotman might be right for me. And you know, that might actually be the case. They might be the right ones for you in that regard. But if that's the case, if you're going to be buying inexpensive watercolor with the intention of working white anyway, there are other inexpensive watercolors that are a little more versatile that will cost about the same, maybe even a little less, that I could recommend over the Cotman set. Alright, so I'm going to let that layer of her hair dry. Alright guys, I return with slightly better lighting. One trip to Target later. And we're going to continue this Cotman demonstration. So I'm going to finally apply that skin tone that not only dried overnight, but dried all afternoon. Then we'll use a little bit of water to blend that out. And give that a chance to dry before we go ahead and darken up the background. Alright guys, so her skin has dried. We're going to try one more layer, see if we can get one more layer of depth in the background since this has had a chance to evaporate. And remember what I told y'all about glow effects. So I'm going to actually let that evaporate a little bit more, or soak into the paper a little bit more, and then I'm going to go over it with a clean brush full of clean water. And this is handling pretty much like chalk would if you made chalk watercolors. So for those of you who read my blog, this is handling a lot like the Alex watercolors did in that review from 2015. And those are like $3 watercolors, and that it's kind of chalky and it dries much lighter and just, you know, annoying and hard to control. I'm going to try to pick up the excess in a moment, because I don't really want it pooling. All right. Alright, I'm going to let that dry. Alright guys, so we are almost done. Gonna try to darken her hair up a little bit and finish her eyes and do her eyebrows. And I may go into her dress and add some gray, more gray shading. So I am working, it's pretty close to the camera so I guess you guys can see. I'm working really thickly with the darker of the two browns, and it's basically like glycerin slop on the paper because I'm trying to get it dark enough. And something you guys should keep in mind that one, watercolor, like transparent watercolors, you shouldn't work with it as thick as gouache. I hear a lot of crafters talking about watercolors and them being like, oh, it's like gouache. The gouache doesn't just refer to the thickness of the watercolor. It also can refer to the general opacity. And yes, gouache is a type of watercolor, but transparent artist grade watercolor is not really designed to be glopped on. You can paint with it directly from the pan with some water, sure, if you're really going for a saturated tone, but it shouldn't feel sticky or soapy, or it shouldn't be like difficult to maneuver. So this is just not really an ideal situation. And I go to length to point that out because there's a lot of confusion about how watercolors should handle, at least among people who are maybe new to watercolor or use it for their crafts rather than for like illustration. So gloppy does not make something gouache-like. It just makes it not a good watercolor option. So it makes me annoyed when I see people making excuses for Cotman in that regard, because there are better options that are very affordable that will handle better than that. And I think I'm going to do a blog post on this, and I think I'm going to cover those options. And another thing, if you enjoy Cotman, if your experiences with Cotman watercolors have been completely different from mine, I think that's fantastic. I respect that you are coming from this from a different point of view. And if you want to link your work, I would love to take a look at it, because I love seeing how people handle media differently than I do. I'm very open to that. So I'm not trying to say that my opinion is the end-all be-all, or that if you disagree with me, you're wrong. Everyone is entitled to their own experiences. I just, as a watercolor comic artist who enjoys teaching other people how to watercolor, I just want the people I teach to have the best first experience possible, without having to spend, an exuberant amount of money. Or, I'm sorry, exorbitant amount of money. And watercolor can be a very accessible, transparent medium that has a wide range of applications. I am very passionate about my love of watercolor, and I like sharing that with other people. And as I see so many artists go traditional for various reasons, I fight even harder for people to give. I see people go digital for a variety of reasons. I fight even harder to introduce new people to traditional media. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I think I'm actually going to try to use the white that came with it. Now, in general, I'm never a fan of the white paints included in watercolor sets, and I may just grab a dark piece of paper to demonstrate it rather than, messing this up. This, I'm moderately happy with it. It's not the greatest thing I've ever painted, but it kind of turned out better than I thought it might. And that's because I do have a fair amount of experience working with Cotman, as much as I complain about them. But I think if you're one of those people whose family enjoys giving you art supplies as presents, if they're going to give you the big Cotman set, just ask for like a small professional grade Windsor & Newton set. You're going to be much happier. I think it's going to last you longer, because I was certainly one of those people who asked my family for Christmas for the big Cotman set and kind of regretted it. So if I can save somebody else that mistake, that will make me happy. And like I said, there are lots of people who probably disagree with me and who do probably use these watercolors and probably get, results that they're very happy with. They've learned how to manage these watercolors. They're satisfied with what they've got. And I'm not trying to diminish their experiences. If I can save somebody else some pain, that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm gonna, like I said, let that dry, and then we're gonna take a look at that white. Okay, so I went and grabbed some dark colored cardstock, and I already activated this white, but it's been a little bit, so it may have evaporated or absorbed, but we're gonna try to really pick up a lot of white watercolor. In fact, why don't we do an opacity test for all these colors? Not that any of them are particularly opaque, but, while we've got the cardstock out, we might as well do this, right? And usually when I do an opacity test, I do it on watercolor paper and I just use a Sharpie to draw a black line and then I go over it. I feel like that gives a better indication of opacity than doing it on colored cardstock, but you guys saw me working on white watercolor paper earlier, so I'm just gonna work my way down the line using a squirrel brush. And I'm working fairly thickly, trying to, if it's going to be opaque, I'm trying to give it the best opportunity for opacity. And I also find this little set to be a bit unwieldy in that if you have it propped open, it doesn't want to lay all the way back flat. So if you have the top up propped up against something, it's going to rock back and forth a whole lot. So that's another problem with this set. And in a moment, I'll also show you that unlike some travel sets, it doesn't even have, I don't want to turn this over because it's wet. We'll do it real quick. It doesn't even have a finger loop. So it makes it a bit unwieldy for a travel set. I suppose if you have bigger hands than me, you can rest your thumb right here, but you're holding it like this, or like this, like a makeup compact, and then there's like all these little trays that you can pull out to give yourself a larger mixing area, and that just kind of makes it even more unwieldy. So we're gonna let this dry, and then we're going to finish this piece down here up. Okay, so this isn't entirely dry, but it's honestly dry enough for us to see that although you are getting some toning, they're not, and they're actually more opaque than some watercolors I've seen, to be fair, but it's not like chalk or gouache. It's not like a brilliant contrast with the paper. The white itself isn't that bad. It's not that great either. It's not like a gouache white, but it's a stronger white than I have sometimes seen with professional grade watercolors. Although to be fair, I usually don't use the white in these sets. So we're going to really cake it on there. We're going to get it really thick. Try that like that. Let that dry, and then we're just going to add our white highlights in. So I'm gonna put a question out there to the community. Have any of you found a pan watercolor that would work as a good gouache replacement? Or have you found a gouache that reconstitutes well and could be kept in a pan for convenience? And if you have any recommendations, let me know in the comments below. I'm super interested in finding something like that. And if I find something like that, I'll be sure to let you guys know as well. Won't keep secrets from each other. Work together, and that way we can all become better, stronger artists. And let's see what I have, because I found a bunch of my other tests from other watercolors. So this is the Daler Rowney Simply Watercolor. Same sort of problem where it's hard to get the colors to mix dark enough. This was from the Up and Up watercolor test, I believe, either that or Crayola. No, that's the Crayola one. This is the Alex watercolors I was telling you guys about. This is the Up and Up water-based markers used as watercolor markers. This is Up and Up washable watercolor used as watercolor. This was Windsor & Newton watercolor. This was done a little while ago. This was probably Windsor & Newton. This was to test out the Acacia Sai outline. This is Windsor & Newton. I think I was able to knock this out a lot faster than I was able to knock that out. And look, over time, my very dark sepia, which was very thickly applied, has gone kind of like chalky. This was probably the Royal Talent. No, it was some other watercolor like the Royal Talons, probably the Pelican opaque watercolor. This is the Royal Talons opaque watercolor. See how it's chalky up there? And then these are just some watercolor tests. And those used to be kept in a mini portfolio, and I have taken them out for whatever reason. I don't know why. I need to replace them. this will go in there with them. And all of those were painted on the same paper that this was painted on. Let me pick these up, and I will be right back. Now, these are some mini watercolors that were painted on the same paper with artist quality, so Winsor Newton, Daniel Smith, probably some core watercolor because I'm using that core watercolor as the silver there. It's a little bit iridescent. Probably some Holbein. These were painted a couple years ago. They were actually properly stored in archival bags and protected from the light. So the color I showed you earlier, I used the same paints on these. And colors are still very brilliant. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns over the years. I found the Cotmans easier to use than I remembered. I remember really fighting with them at AWA and being very frustrated. But I also didn't have the luxury of time. I couldn't allow my paints to evaporate, and I was working on multiple pieces at a time, which was something I had done with the Sakura Koi sets, and didn't have quite as many problems. So if you guys are interested in seeing me do a similar test with Sakura Koi watercolors, let me know in the comments below, and that is something I will look into. This was done because a lot of my backers had requested that I test the Cotmans in a comparative field test, the way I test all my other watercolor illustrations. And again, I was happy to comply. So some comparable watercolors that would cost less. Prima Marketing Tropical set is fairly comparable in terms of quality, at least how I feel based on the field tests that I've done. And it costs about half as much as the Cotman set, and it comes in a nicer tin that you can then fill with whatever watercolors you want to. Sakura Koi, if you're looking for intense color and you want a lot of saturation, those are really good, and I have a review of the field set here on this channel that is either a little bit cheaper or about the same price as this Cotman set. You can actually get Holbein watercolors and Magella watercolors, which are fantastic. They're wonderful, beautiful watercolors. You can get them in tubes on Amazon for roughly the same price, a very comparable price to these. And then you would need to buy your own half pans or your own container to fill them with. But that's actually not that hard, and that's something that I would consider a worthwhile investment. You can also get the Daniel Smith watercolor essential set. This is only 6 colors, but they're all mixing colors, and I have a video coming up where we're going to go over that together. And I showed you guys how to put together a little travel watercolor set from those. You can get these. They're more expensive, but they're higher quality paints. You can also get the Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolors for about the same price. And if you're not looking to do a lot of layering and you're looking to work quick, those are fantastic. And I've covered those at nattosoup.blogspot.com in depth, and I have a few videos where I, demonstrate using them for you guys. And I actually have a piece painted with those on hand. So if you guys enjoy using Cotman watercolors, if you've made them work for you, I'd love to hear about your experiences. I'm not trying to knock anyone who does make it work for them. I'm just trying to help other artists who might be just starting out, who might look at the Cotmans and feel confused because Winsor & Newton packages their professional grade watercolors in pretty much the same packaging. They package many of their Cotman sets, so you really have to be careful which one you're getting if you want to use the Winsor & Newton professional grade watercolors. And I also know some professional watercolors who don't care for the professional grade watercolors, who really swear by the Holbein. And I have used Holbein for years, but I've never done a test with exclusively Holbein, so that is something I would like to do in the future, but it's going to have to wait until funds are a little more solvent. However, if you have a set of Holbein and you'd like to send me like maybe even quarter-filled half pans, just enough for me to do the test, let me know in the comments below and I'll send you something in return. Always interested in making those kind of deals, those kind of trades. So thank you guys so much for watching my field test of the Winsor & Newton Cotman. This is one of their field sets, but I don't believe this is the one that is called the field set. They have even smaller sets like this where it's just the colors and you don't get any of the trays. I hope this video was helpful to you guys. I hope it answered some questions for you. If you have further questions, you can always let me know in the comments below, and I will be happy to help you as best as I can. And if there's something I don't know or cannot answer, I'll do the research, or I will point you to someone who has already done that research. Give them a little bit of publicity, give them a little recognition for their hard work. So if you're looking for even more watercolor reviews beyond my channel and my blog, I highly recommend Owing's Art YouTube channel. He has reviewed a lot of brands that I have not. So if you're looking for something that is affordable, you should definitely head on over to his channel and check that out as well. So I will see you guys really soon. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope y'all have a great day. Bye, guys!